My wife cheated with my cousin and had a baby. My family kept it secret for years, and now they want back into my life as I've found success. The past has a funny way of showing up uninvited, usually when you finally manage to sweep its dust out the door and change the locks. For me, it didn't just knock, it tried to kick the door down, holding a screaming child and a decade's worth of secrets. My life now is one of structured, quiet success. I run a tech firm that's finally hitting its stride, my apartment overlooks the city skyline, and my evenings are spent with a woman who believes trust is more than just a word. But 10 years ago, I was a different man, living a life I thought was perfect, a life built on a foundation of lies so deep I was standing on quicksand and calling it solid ground. Her name was Chloe, and my world revolved around her. We had the kind of love you see in movies, or so I thought. We were high school sweethearts who had navigated college and the awkward first years of adulthood together. She was my confidant, my biggest cheerleader, and the person I believed I would grow old with. Our families were intertwined, especially mine. My cousin, Alex, was like a brother to me. We grew up in each other's backyards, our family holidays were a loud, joyous mess of shared traditions, and I always believed that the bonds we had were unbreakable. When Chloe and I got married, it felt like the final, perfect piece of our shared world clicking into place. Alex was my best man, and during his speech, he tearfully called Chloe the sister he never had and talked about how our love inspired him. The memory of that speech is a ghost that haunts me now, its words twisted into a cruel parody. The first couple of years of our marriage were blissful. We were building our future, I was working my way up at a small IT company, and Chloe was a freelance graphic designer. Life was simple and beautiful. The cracks started to appear so subtly that I didn't even recognize them. They were hairline fractures in the beautiful vase I thought was our life. Chloe started becoming distant, blaming it on work stress. She'd lock herself in her home office for hours, and when she emerged, she seemed hollowed out. Our conversations became superficial, our laughter forced. She started spending more time with Alex. I thought nothing of it. Of course, she would. He was her brother, her friend. They'd go out for drinks to de-stress, or he'd come over to keep her company when I was working late. I encouraged it. I was glad she had someone to lean on. I was a fool, a trusting, naive fool who believed in the inherent goodness of the people I loved. The real turning point, though I didn't see it then, was a business trip Alex had to take to a conference on the West Coast. Chloe announced she was going with him. She framed it as a mini vacation, a chance to get a change of scenery and find some creative inspiration. It made sense to me. I was swamped with a major project and couldn't get away. I remember driving them to the airport, kissing Chloe goodbye, and clapping Alex on the back. "Take care of her for me," I said with a smile. The irony is a physical weight in my chest, even now. When she came back, she was different. The distance was now a chasm. A few weeks later, she sat me down on our beige sofa, the one we'd spent a whole weekend picking out, and told me she was leaving. There was no big fight, no dramatic confrontation. Just a quiet, devastating finality. She said she wasn't happy, that she felt lost, and that she needed to be on her own to figure things out. She couldn't give me a better reason. I begged, I pleaded, I asked what I had done wrong. I offered to go to counseling, to change jobs, to do anything. But her eyes were empty, her decision made. She packed a bag and walked out of my life, leaving a silence that was louder than any argument. The next few months were a blur of pain. I called her, I texted her, but my messages went unanswered. I reached out to my family for support, and they were there for me, or so it seemed. My parents would have me over for dinner, my sister would call to check in, and even Alex, my good, loyal cousin Alex, would take me out for a beer and listen to me pour my heart out. He'd shake his head and say, "I don't understand her, man. I don't know what she's thinking." He looked me right in the eye and lied, his face a mask of sympathy. My family watched me grieve for a woman they knew was never coming back, for a reason they all knew. They let me blame myself, letting me believe I was the one who had failed, that I was the reason my marriage had fallen apart. The deception was absolute. I eventually realized I couldn't heal in the same city that held all my ghosts. I needed a clean break. I took a job offer in a new city, hundreds of miles away. It was a terrifying decision, but it was the only one that felt right. I packed up my life, sold the house that was supposed to be our forever home, and left. I told my family it was for my career, and they all nodded with understanding, probably with a shared sigh of relief. The first few years were the hardest. I poured every ounce of my being into my work. It was my refuge, my therapy. I worked 80-hour weeks, fueled by coffee and a desperate need to build something that couldn't be taken away from me. Slowly, I started to build a new life. I made new friends, people who knew me as the man I was becoming, not the broken man I had been. And then, I met Amelia. She was a breath of fresh air, a woman whose laughter was genuine and whose eyes held no secrets. She was patient and kind, and she taught me how to trust again. We built a life together, one based on honesty and mutual respect. My company started to take off, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of peace. I still thought of Chloe, but the pain had dulled to a scar, a reminder of a past I had survived. I rarely spoke to my family. The distance had created a natural drift, and our calls became less frequent, limited to birthdays and holidays. I didn't suspect anything was amiss. I was too busy living my new life. The past came crashing back into my life in the most mundane, corporate way imaginable. My company was in the process of acquiring a smaller tech firm, and I was personally reviewing the files of the key employees we would be retaining. As I clicked through the digital profiles, a familiar name flashed across my screen: Alex. My cousin. I hadn't known he worked there. My heart did a strange little flip. For a moment, it was nostalgia. I clicked on his file, a small smile on my face, curious about his life. And that's when I saw it. Under the emergency contact section was her name, Chloe. And below that, listed as a dependent, was a name I had never seen before: Leo. My eyes scanned across to the date of birth. My blood ran cold. I felt the air leave my lungs as my brain did the math, my fingers tracing the timeline in the air. The child, Leo, was born exactly 9 months after that business trip Chloe had taken with Alex. The trip I had encouraged. The trip I had driven them to the airport for. It wasn't a vacation. It wasn't for creative inspiration. It was a lie. Everything was a lie. The room started to spin. The quiet hum of the office servers sounded like a roar in my ears. The puzzle pieces of the last decade slammed into place with brutal, unforgiving clarity. Chloe's distance, the sudden breakup, my family's gentle guidance to let her go, Alex's feigned sympathy. It was a conspiracy, a grand, elaborate deception with me as the sole audience member who didn't know it was all a show. I didn't react immediately. I sat there, in my glass-walled office, looking out at the city I had conquered, and I felt like that same broken man from 10 years ago. But this time, the heartbreak was replaced by a cold, sharp rage. I went home to Amelia and, for the first time, told her the entire story of my past, a story that now had a new, horrifying final chapter. She listened, her hand never leaving mine, her presence a steady anchor in my storm. With her support, I decided to confront them, but on my terms. The next day, I called Alex into my office. He walked in with a cocky smile, ready to greet his long-lost cousin who was now his new boss. The smile faltered when he saw my face. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't yell. I simply slid the printed HR file across my polished mahogany desk. He looked down at it, his face turning ashen. He saw Chloe's name, the child's name, the date of birth. He looked up at me, his eyes wide with panic. And he crumbled. The whole sordid story came pouring out. He and Chloe had been having an affair for almost a year before she left me. The trip was their romantic getaway. She had discovered she was pregnant shortly after she left me. My family, my loving, supportive family, had known everything. They had decided, as a group, that telling me the truth would be too painful. They had helped Chloe move, helped her and Alex set up their new life together, all while patting me on the back and telling me I was better off. They chose to protect the secret, not me. The floodgates opened. Once Alex knew I knew, he must have made a frantic call to the rest of the family. My phone, which had been silent for so long, began to explode. Texts, voicemails, emails from my parents, my sister, all of them. A chorus of desperate, hollow apologies. We did it to protect you. We didn't want to see you hurt. It was such a mess, we didn't know what to do. And then came the true motive, wrapped in a thin veil of sentimentality. Leo is your blood, too, my mother had written in a long, rambling email. He's your nephew. He deserves to know his family. We've seen how well you're doing. We're so proud. Maybe it's time to let bygones be bygones. They wanted back in. Now that I was successful, now that I had something they could admire, or perhaps benefit from, they wanted to mend the bridges they had burned and hidden from me. But the story didn't end there. My anger, now a cold, calculating force, drove me to dig deeper. I was no longer a heartbroken boy, I was a man with resources. I hired a private investigator. I wanted to know everything. What he uncovered was a plot twist that turned my tragedy into a twisted farce. Chloe had a history of infidelity that went back years, even before we were married. My family knew. They had seen her with other men, had covered for her, had made excuses. They had seen me as a safe, stable, and perhaps gullible choice for her. They had pushed for the marriage, hoping I would be the one to finally settle her down. My entire relationship had been a sham, a project my family had undertaken to manage their problem child. My pain wasn't just a byproduct of their secret, it was a calculated risk they were willing to take. Just as I was processing this new layer of betrayal, I received a package at my office. It was a thick envelope with no return address. Inside was a letter, and the handwriting was instantly recognizable. It was from Chloe. Her tone was not apologetic, it was desperate. She confirmed everything the investigator had found. She told me that her life with Alex was a disaster. He was buried in debt, their relationship was volatile, and they were on the verge of losing everything. The success my family had seen on social media had made me their lottery ticket. But then came the final, gut-wrenching twist. She was sick. She had been diagnosed with a rare form of leukemia and was in need of a bone marrow transplant. Her chances of finding a match were low, and the medical bills were astronomical. She wrote, "Leo might need his family one day. He might need you." She was using the son she'd had with my cousin, the child who was the living symbol of her betrayal, as a bargaining chip for her own survival. It was a checkmate of emotional blackmail. I was being asked not just to forgive, but to save the lives of the people who had destroyed mine. I agreed to a meeting. Amelia stood by my side, her quiet strength giving me my own. I chose the venue, the main boardroom of my company, a sterile, imposing room on the top floor, with a panoramic view of the city I now called home. It was my territory. They all came, my parents, my sister, Alex, and Chloe. And with them, they brought Leo. He was a small, quiet boy with my family's eyes, a ghost of what could have been, an innocent pawn in a game he didn't understand. They started with tears. My mother pleaded, my father stood silently with his head bowed, and Chloe, looking frail and thin, watched me with desperate eyes. Alex couldn't even look at me. They talked about forgiveness, about family, about the importance of blood. They wanted me to be the bigger person, the savior, the solution to all their problems. I let them finish. The room fell silent, the only sound the soft hum of the city below. I looked at each of them, the architects of my deepest pain. Then I looked at Leo, who was staring at the model of a new software architecture on the credenza. He was just a kid. I turned to my family and spoke, my voice calm and steady, devoid of the rage and pain that had been my companions for so long. I told them I knew everything. About Chloe's history, about their complicity, about their hopes that I would fix her. I watched the shock and shame wash over their faces. I told them that forgiveness was something I might find one day, for my own sake, for my own peace. But trust, I explained, was a delicate thing, and they had not just broken it, they had ground it into dust. Then, I addressed the issue of Chloe and Leo. I told them I would not be their financial lifeline. I would not re enter their world of lies and manipulation. However, I would not punish a child for the sins of his parents. I had my lawyers set up an irrevocable trust fund for Leo. It would cover his education, his healthcare, and any future needs he might have. It would be managed by an impartial third party, and they would have no control over it. My help would be a silent, invisible safety net for the boy, not a blank check for them. I also told Chloe that the trust would cover her medical expenses, but that was the extent of my involvement. I would not be her emotional support, her confidant, or her friend. A wave of stunned silence filled the room. This wasn't the outcome they had expected. They had hoped for a tearful reunion, for absolution, for access to my life and my success. I gave them a solution, but not the one they wanted. I stood up, and Amelia stood with me. I looked at my parents one last time. I wish you all the best, I said, and the words were true. I did. But their best would have to be found without me. As Amelia and I walked out of the boardroom, leaving them sitting in the cold, sterile monument to my new life, I didn't look back. I was walking towards my future, a future I had built not from the ashes of my past, but in spite of it. The door clicked shut behind me, and for the first time, it felt like I was the one who had finally, and truly, changed the locks.